I used to live in an unnoteworthy, simple neighborhood right in the center of a regular old town. Most of the families living around there had been there for years, if not decades. I was in the same boat, having grown up there and had the house handed down from my parents when they moved away. This was in my third year living in that house. At some point during the fall, a new neighbor moved into one of the houses across the street from mine. I wasn't the type to go introduce myself or anything like that, but I saw him moving his stuff out of a U-Haul, and he looked like any other ordinary guy. A week after he moved in went by with nothing else to note until one night I got home from work and saw the guy standing outside my home. He wasn't walking by or walking up to my house, just standing on the sidewalk looking at it. I pulled into the garage and got out to go say hi, but in the 20 seconds it took me to get out, he was already gone. The next morning, while I was outside grabbing the mail, I happened to look across the street at his house. Just before I looked away, I caught a glimpse of something move in the upstairs window. All that was left were the blinds shifting back and forth like he'd just been standing there, maybe watching me. I got a little unsettled, but tried not to worry myself. Once the sun set, I thought surely I was good for the night, but I did one more look out the window, and that's when I saw him again. He was standing at the end of my driveway, as if he was close up to my house just a moment ago. I went to the front door and walked out toward him, trying to be friendly. But as soon as he saw me, he started walking down the sidewalk, pretending like he was just going for a stroll. I called out a couple times only to be ignored. Now I was really sketched out. I stayed up for another couple hours, but I still went to bed with that aching gut feeling that I was being watched. I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. I was so awake, eyes wide open, and heart beating rapidly. That sinking gut feeling that I was being watched still remained. I got out of bed and put my ear up to the door. After a moment, I could hear soft creaks in the hallway. I knelt down and looked under the door. I saw nothing on the other side of the door. I stayed knelt down for a few seconds, and then something suddenly moved past it. I jumped back. The creaking instantly stopped. He heard me. After a moment of hesitation, several loud footsteps moved along the floor and right up to the other side of the room. I could see the shadow of his boots under the door. They started shifting around, and then suddenly I couldn't see anything. The whole bottom of the door was covered up by something. I leaned a bit closer. It took a second to make out what it was, but just barely I saw an eye looking back at me. He was looking under the door. I jumped up, ran around and got my phone. My hands were shaking so badly it was difficult to even dial 911. I could hear him moving around outside the room too, thumping on the floor. When cops arrived, they found the house to be empty. I immediately told them my suspicions of the neighbor across the street from me. They went over and talked to him. Apparently one thing led to another, and the guy blew his cover, accidentally admitting to something he shouldn't have known. They took him in and were able to get the full story out of him, confirming he was the one that broke into my home that night, and he'd been watching me for a lot longer than I was aware of. Cops found his search history having my name in it several times over the course of the last month, even prior to him moving to the neighborhood. There's a chance he even made the move specifically to be right across from me. He had some other similar weird stalking cases in the past. I still haven't gone a day without thinking about it. He must have broken into my home that night for a reason other than just to stalk me. I think he had some horrible intentions, and I was lucky. My gut feeling kept me from opening my door.
A few years ago, I moved to a new city, the outskirts of the city to be more specific. The house I bought was small, but nice. A few days after moving in, though, a knock came at the front door. The man was a tall, older guy with black hair and a patchy medium beard. He introduced himself as Todd, a neighbor from a few doors down. He wanted to say hi and welcome me to the neighborhood. He asked some basic questions just to get to know me, why I moved, where I moved from, and if I moved with anyone. In the context of being a new neighbor, these didn't seem like off-putting questions at all. He mentioned he lived with his wife Sarah and enjoyed the peace and quiet of the neighborhood. Todd seemed like a nice guy, just trying to be a decent neighbor. The next few days, I settled in. Oddly, it was hard not to notice that nobody was ever outside. The whole town felt hollow, empty in a way that made me feel out of place. But around 4 o'clock one afternoon, Todd came by again. He wanted to let me know that he and his wife were having a get-together with a bunch of the other neighbors for dinner that night at 7:30 at his place. He said it'd be a great opportunity for me to get to meet all the other nice people around here. I accepted the offer. Come 7:30, I got ready and started walking over to his place. The whole neighborhood was dark and silent, peaceful, but also a little strange feeling. As I got up to Todd's place, it looked the same, inactive. I headed up to the door. It was already cracked open, but I still knocked. Todd immediately yelled from inside for me to come on in. His voice echoed through the halls, and it was real quiet in there. No other voices or even sounds of movement. I took a few steps in. His home had very moody lighting, making it dark and shadowy in all the rooms. I headed down to the kitchen, where I heard Todd's voice come from, but when I got there, it was empty. He wasn't there. I called out his name and then his wife's name and got no response. And then I noticed there was nothing even in the kitchen. No food on the table and no signs of any sort of get-together. The realization set in that nobody else was here. Then all of a sudden, I heard the front door slam shut. I quickly called out Todd's name again, only to still be met by the disturbing silence. I walked back to the end of the hallway, confirming the front door was now shut. I felt a sense of imminent danger. I started hurrying up to the front door, and as I did, I heard a couple steps from somewhere in one of the rooms behind me. I didn't waste any time turning to look. I got up to the door. It was locked in 3 different places, which told me this definitely wasn't some sort of accident. As I undid all the locks, Todd called my name out and asked where I was going. I could hear him quickly approaching behind me, his voice getting deeper and less friendly. I got the door open and sprinted back home. I debated calling the police, but ultimately decided I would. I'm glad I did, because a couple minutes after making it home, Todd showed up, banging on my door and peering into my windows. He left before the officers made it. In the questioning from the cops, it turned out Todd had never planned any get-together with other neighbors and didn't even have a wife or live with anyone named Sarah. He lived there alone for over a decade. Basically, everything he told me was a lie. Unfortunately, nothing could be done about it because there was no way to prove he was trying to do anything bad. I moved away from there as soon as possible. Every so often, I'll check up on that guy, hoping he'd been arrested or something, because I know if he isn't, he's just going to find another victim to lure into his home.
In my late 20s, I moved a few towns over for work. The apartment building was small, just 6 units, and only 2 per floor. I was on the top story, and the woman who lived across from me was the one who gave me the tour. The woman was older than me, around 45, and she was very non-expressive, sort of monotone, and didn't seem to care about her appearance. She had long, shaggy hair and a tired, mute look over her face every time I saw her. On my first full day of work after the move, I came home late at 8 p.m., heading up the stairs and found the woman standing outside the door to my room. She looked at me with that dead stare she always had, and then she asked if this was when I usually got home from work. I thought that was an odd question. Without even acknowledging my answer, she turned, opened her door, walked into her room, and slammed the door shut behind her. I was too tired to give it much thought. I must have slept pretty good because I was passed out until 6 a.m. when I was woken abruptly by a loud knock at the door. The knocks kept coming, so I had no choice but to open the door. The woman was standing there, looking the same as always, almost like a walking corpse.
"Can I help you?" I said, groggy. She made this really strange, surely fake smile and asked a really weird question. She wanted me to come over to her place after work tonight. There was still no emotion in her voice, which gave it a really unsettling feeling. I tried to be nice and said I was just going to be busy. Without any further response, she again turned around and went back into her room, slamming the door shut behind her. The day was long once again. I didn't make it back to the apartment until 9:15. I hoped this meant the woman wouldn't bother me tonight. When I got up to my room, she wasn't there. I sighed in relief and put my key in the door, but something was off. It was already unlocked. I froze for a second. She had to be the only other person that could unlock it. I opened the door, and the door closed behind me as I took a few steps into my apartment. The lights were all off, just like I left them, but my bedroom door was open. I could hear my heart beating as I walked up and looked into my room. The woman was standing next to my bed, her face mostly covered by shadows, but I could still see the dull, emotionless expression she had. I started to mutter, "What are you doing?" But I stumbled over my words when I glanced down at the kitchen knife in her hand. I ran for the door. I grabbed the handle and tried to swing it open, but almost lost my footing as I wasn't expecting it to not budge. It was stuck in the doorway. The knob wouldn't even move. I immediately knew the woman had rigged the door to lock me inside with her. In that moment, rather than being scared, I was pissed off. She came at me, still holding the knife, but I was very easily able to catch her off guard and get the knife away from her. I held her down and called the police. It was only after they got her in handcuffs that I noticed she'd actually gotten a quick slash on the back of my arm. She apparently had some serious disorders and wasn't taking the proper medication for the last several months, leading to her having an episode. That was the excuse I got from her family, but it didn't really change anything. In the end, though, everything worked out okay. It definitely could have been 1,000 times worse.